Welcome to A Meaningful Marketplace.
I'm Sarah Masoni from Oregon State University's Food Innovation Center, where I've helped countless dreamers launch their new food products. It's the science of taking a food delight from the kitchen to mass manufacturing and still keeping its great taste. That's what I do. I've been called the woman with the $1 million palate, although I haven't tried to cash that check yet. Listen in weekly for real-life stories.
I'm Sarah Marshall, owner of Marshall's Hot Sauce and author of Preservation Pantry, modern canning from root to top and stem to core. I love inspiring business owners to get started on their journey, encourage folks to be part of their local community, and I'm excited to help business owners tell their stories.
Hello, and welcome to the Meaningful Marketplace. We are here weekly to discuss the journeys of food entrepreneurs, and we're glad you joined us today as we bring you stories of hope and inspiration. This is Sarah Masoni of Oregon State University's Food Innovation Center. So normally I would check in with Sarah Marshall, but she and her daughter just ran to get their hair done before the holidays, and I can't blame them. Got to go for it when opportunities arise. We're currently partnering with the Regional Food Business Center, Northwest and Rocky Mountain, to bring guests from our 6-state region. And we're currently meeting business owners from the great state of Washington. Emily Whittier is our co-host today, and I want to thank you for being our Washington expert while we meet all these wonderful new friends. I think you said you might have some food news you could share.
Hi, Sarah. So glad to be here. Thank you. Yes, just a little bit of food news in this lull between or before the holiday season, but we have some upcoming Produce Safety Alliance grower trainings, and we'll put the link to that in the show notes so you can find the training closest to you. But those will be coming up throughout the state of Washington. And if you're not familiar with it already, the Produce Safety Alliance grower training is an FDA-recognized curriculum for produce farmers. It provides an in-depth overview of produce safety, the Food Safety Modernization Act, Produce Safety Rule, good agricultural practices, and co-management of natural resources and food safety. So some of those registrations have already closed, but there's still slots open for the month of January. So jump on the website. As always, I encourage folks interested in learning about these upcoming events between episodes to check out the event page on the Northwest and Rocky Mountain Regional Food Business Center website. You can also go to the Washington State page and scroll down at the bottom, and every event that's been tagged for the state of Washington will show up right on our state page.
Thank you. We'd like to encourage you to connect with your state by signing up for the Regional Food Business Center newsletter. It's a breeze to sign up. Go to the Northwest Rocky Mountain Regional Food Business Center.com, hit connect with us, and choose the button to receive newsletters or connect with Sarah Masoni. That's a top secret idea there. You can just select me and get a 30-minute meeting with Sarah Masoni. So we want to thank our sponsor for supporting the Meaningful Marketplace. Thank you for helping spread the word about small business owners and entrepreneurs. Let's hear a word from our sponsor.
The Northwest and Rocky Mountain Regional Food Business Center is the proud sponsor of the Meaningful Marketplace podcast, giving a voice to food from across the 6-state region of Colorado, Idaho, Montana, Oregon, Washington, and Wyoming. The Food Business Center supports Northwest and Rocky Mountain food industry makers as part of the USDA's National Network of Food Business Centers, supporting a more resilient, diverse, and competitive food system as a go-to source for small and mid-tier food and farm businesses with a focus on underserved communities, providing education in the form of technical knowledge, business programs, and industry news. We sponsor trade shows, meetups, and conferences to connect growers, producers, retailers, distributors, and processors, all to stimulate business and raise the standards of our storied food industry. Join us as we travel through the 6-state region, learning more about food makers, food hubs, and food systems. Visit the website at Northwest Rocky Mountain Regional Food Businesses.com to get connected.
Okay, Emily and I are not alone in the studio today. We actually have a guest from Washington State, and her name is Virginia Thomas, and she's with Clover Mountain Dairy and Columbia Community Creamery. Thanks for joining us today, Virginia. I really appreciate that you came.
Thank you, Sarah and Emily. It's very nice to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, so we always like to start at the beginning. Can you share your story of how Clover Mountain Dairy was founded, and then tell us a little bit also about the other opportunity that you're working in, the Community Creamery?
Sure. So Clover Mountain Dairy is a small dairy farm in Chewelah, which is about an hour north of Spokane, Washington, in eastern Washington. And we started in 2018. My husband and I met while we were both serving in the Coast Guard. And he continued in the Coast Guard and he retired in 2020. And that's when we started farming full time. And we started with bottling milk and making cheese. And Clover Mountain doesn't exist anywhere. We came up with the term Clover Mountain because we are 100% grass-based grazing dairy, and we wanted people to think about cows in the mountains when they heard the name of our farm. So that's how we came up with Clover Mountain Dairy.
That's a pretty name, actually. And tell us, what is Columbia Community Creamery?
Okay, so Clover Mountain Dairy is our own business. We have an LLC. And then with the consolidation in the dairy industry and the lack of access for small dairy farmers to have access to processing, a group of community members, including myself and my husband, joined together to create a nonprofit. It's the first and only nonprofit milk processing plant in the nation. And it opened in June 2023 in Chewelah, Washington. They currently are bottling whole milk and this eggnog season. So they're doing eggnog. They make ice cream, and they've also done cream and things like that. And the other part of their mission is education for the community. So they offer like cheese making classes and things like that. So it's a kind of a grassroots nonprofit effort in our community to keep dairy processing and encourage small dairy farms in Eastern Washington.
That's really wonderful. So tell us a little bit more about what inspired you and your husband to pursue dairy farming and cheese and ice cream and all that good stuff.
Sure. It's kind of interesting. I like to tell people I did everything not to be a dairy farmer in my life. I'm from rural Eastern North Carolina. I grew up in a family of fishermen, and I joined the Coast Guard. I originally wanted to go to Antarctica on an icebreaker, and the Coast Guard, in their wisdom, sent me to Wisconsin, the America's dairy land. And then they sent me somebody who wanted to be a dairy farmer that I fell in love with. Our first date actually was at a cheese factory in Wisconsin. I should have known at that time.
That's great.
But his family had also been milk haulers since 1946. And so he grew up riding on a milk truck. And I didn't know anything about dairy cows or really any type of animal farming. So it was a big transition for me. But once I started working on some farms, raising dairy calves as we moved around in the Coast Guard, and then I actually took the WSU online organic farming certificate. And as part of that, I did an internship on an organic valley shipper in Wahkiakum County, Washington. And I just loved it. I loved cows. I loved the lifestyle of being on a small farm. I loved that every day was definitely different. Even though you have certain chores or things that you're going to do, it was just every day was different. And you worked hard, but you also could kind of set your schedule. And so I think that's kind of how we came to it, was once he was going to retire from the Coast Guard, we bought land in 2010 north of Spokane. He had another 10 years left in the Coast Guard, and we built up our farm from scratch. So we had to put in a well and electricity, and we built our own house, and we built our barn and all the fencing and everything. And so it really was a labor of love. And sometimes when people ask us, why are you a dairy farmer? And it's really just because we love the cows and we love the lifestyle. And of course, who doesn't love high quality dairy products from your own farm?
Exactly. So if you could put a pin on it, so you're north of Spokane?
Correct. We're an hour north of Spokane and an hour south of the Canadian border.
So you're pretty far north. Have you seen any snow yet?
We have snow up in the mountains, and we've had just, a little bit of flurries that kind of stuck to the ground. But just this last weekend, we had a lot of rain.
Yeah, it's been rainy, hasn't it? So how has the Clover Mountain Dairy evolved over the years? Do you think you're going to keep growing, or are you going to stay the size you are right now?
So we'll probably stay about the size we are right now. We're pretty small. We're milking 6 cows, and we are breeding for 8 next year. A lot of our dairy equipment on our farm is things that we bought and repurposed. Our bulk tank is from the 1950s. Our milking parlor is from the 1960s. It's a surge side opener that we repurposed and painted and are reusing. And then because we were bottling vat pasteurized milk, so in a 30-gallon vat pasteurizer. So all of our equipment is kind of size small. So we would have to get like a whole new bulk tank and a whole new like pasteurizer if we wanted to do more. But this level of work right now and income meets our needs. And we don't have a high debt load because that's how we planned our farm. And so that really gives us the freedom to farm the way that we want to farm.
Emily, do you have any questions for Virginia?
I do. I was having a great time earlier exploring your farm's website as well as the creamery's website. And I noticed at Clover Mountain, part of your mission is using regenerative agricultural methods to nourish the land that you're farming on. And I'm curious, I think we hear the word regenerative a lot with farmers doing all of these amazing, innovative things. And I'm curious to know what regenerative means to you on your farm.
So I think it was in 2015 when I went to the Moses Organic Conference in Wisconsin. And I think the keynote speaker at that time was talking to a whole room of organic farmers about how being sustainable was not enough. That being sustainable was just about maintaining. Whereas moving forward, we really need to look at like how we can rebuild or how we can improve. And that became known mostly as the term regenerative, this idea that you're not just taking things away or just maintaining a certain level, but you're actually increasing and improving. So one way that we've seen that on our farm is in soil organic matter, which is measured by percent. And we're dryland farm, so we don't have any irrigation. We are about 15 to 20 inches of rain a year. And that usually comes between October and May. So in the height of summer, we don't have a lot of moisture. So we really have to be wise in how we use land and the plants we use. The soil organic matter when we first started was like 1% or less. And now we're over 4%, which is really good with our soil structure and being a dryland farm. And we really attribute that to using our cows and intensive rotational grazing. So during the grazing season, we use electric fence and we move them every day. And so that really helps. You know, there's a connection between the cows and the land and the plants and how they eat. And so moving them every day really heightens that. And we really are able to harness that power to improve the tilth and the minerals and the organic matter that we have in our soil. Another thing that we've done that's kind of unique and different on our farm is as a small dairy farm, we knew we definitely didn't want to have like a manure lagoon. And we were trying to find ways to handle mostly wash water from our processing plant from making cheese or, you know, wash down water from the milking parlor because we have a composted bedded pack in our barn. So most of our manure is handled as a solid anyway, but we found some information and worked with our local county for our dairy nutrient management plan. And we have a constructed wetland that we use to handle any of our, like our wastewater from our dairy. So it first goes into almost like a settling tank, like a septic tank, but then it comes out to a tiered constructed wetland, which has become a beneficial habitat on our farm. So there's lots of kinds of things that regenerative means to us and that we're working on to improve our farm.
Do you also have like free range chickens and stuff like ducks and things like that following the cows around the pasture after they move?
So we have free range chickens and they will go out into the fields, but they mostly do hang around the main farm buildings and barn. They will go through the bedded pack. I have no idea what they're doing in there, but
they're
doing magical things.
Yeah.
And they also keep, you know, we don't have any ticks or anything on our farm because they would take care of any of that. And so we don't keep them like in a mobile coop that we move behind the cows. But I will also say we have quite a vibrant amount of wild turkeys in our area.
That's cool.
So in case you didn't know, a group of wild turkeys is called a rafter. That's just an interesting fact you can now have. And we'll have like 40, 50 turkeys just, and they kind of perform the same thing out in the main fields that like a chicken would.
Yeah.
So
have you ever
that's kinda-
harvested a wild turkey?
I have not, but if I ever needed to, I could do it pretty easily, I think.
That's pretty cool. So, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've faced in the dairy industry?
I guess some of the biggest things is it seems like when you say the word dairy industry, there's this idea that a lot of times there should only be one type of milk or one type of processing and everything should be like that. Whereas if you think about like the coffee industry or the chocolate industry or the beer industry or any of these industries, they have lots of different tiers, and there's no real push to stay in your lane. So, you can have craft beers, you can have craft chocolate, you can have craft, but when you're doing dairy and it doesn't fall into like the large main scale dairy, it almost seems like, oh, well, you're not a serious dairy person. Or, why are you trying to tear down like large conventional dairy? If you're just like telling your story and sharing like how you're doing things, it can be seen as detrimental to somebody who's not doing it that way. Whereas it seems like in other industries, there's not that kind of friction or competition. Not that, our 6 dairy cows are really causing
actually
a lot.
There's a big movement for small dairies like yours, I think, here in the West Coast. And so give you kudos for doing that. Can you tell us how you maintain the quality and uniqueness of your products?
Well, definitely the most important thing is telling your own story. So people can buy milk or dairy products from anywhere. So the main thing is they want to have a connection to the farmer and to the product. And then because we're smaller, I think that we can have a little bit more quality control on the type of product that we're producing. And because we know that our product's going to a neighbor or a friend, like an end user that we're going to know and see later at the grocery store or the post office, it's different than just making something that's going to get shipped off somewhere and you don't have that connection. So being able to be small and focus a little bit more on the product and also being able to relate our story to the buyers, I think are key attributes.
Thanks. And guess what? We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to ask you all about those unique products that you're making. Oregon State University's College of Agricultural Sciences and the Food Innovation Center are proud sponsors of Meaningful Marketplace. With a mission to serve all Oregonians, we are committed to giving voice to those whose food and agricultural stories are not always heard. By providing access and opportunity for a more diverse and just food system, because food brings people together. All right, Virginia, can you tell us exactly what you are making and selling from your dairy farm?
We started out selling whole milk that we were bottling, and then we decided to do some yogurt, and now we have moved all the way into cheese. And I think it was about 2 years ago, we installed a cheese cave on our farm.
Ooh, that's
It's
cool.
large water tank, actually, like half underground, half above ground, that we cut a hole in, and it stays about 50, 55 degrees.
Perfect.
And then about 85% humidity.
Wow.
And so that allowed us to think about aging cheeses. So during the summertime, we do focus a lot on like fresh cheeses such as feta, cheddar curds, Monterey Jack, pepper jack. And then during the fall, we start making Gouda and aging it in our cave. This coming summer, I want to develop a Gruyere style cheese that we can age in our cave. And so currently, those are our main cheeses that we're making. We did buy a cold smoker, so I just smoked some Gouda for the first time. So that's exciting. And
that is exciting.
In September, we visited Switzerland, and that's the Gruyere region, and worked with a cheesemaker there. And so that was a very interesting trip to talk to other cheesemakers and dairy farmers and see the similarities and the differences.
Is Gruyere made in a big copper kettle, or I can't remember?
Yes, so they totally do use the copper kettle, and there's this belief that copper actually really, I don't have a copper kettle, but
Oh, we had to get you one. Hey, everyone, Virginia needs a copper kettle.
but they do believe that does really affect the actual cheese.
Yeah, it does have an impact. Back in 1974, I traveled over to Europe with my family, and I got to go see that cheese being made. That's how I knew it was made in a copper kettle. So we also talked a little bit about how you're involved with the Columbia Community Creamery. And I wonder if you could tell us how that started and what it means for your dairy.
Definitely. So as I mentioned before, Columbia Community Creamery started as a group of 8 community members. Some were farmers, some, we had somebody from the conservation district, we had a large animal vet, we had a local high school ag teacher. So it was really quite a group of people who came together with this idea of, this area in Northeast Washington State used to have like 360 dairy farms in the 1960s. And now in our county alone, we have 8. And there was only one place that you could sell milk to. It's the cooperative in Washington State called Dairy Gold. And they only had one route up in our area. And there's no way, if you wanted to start dairying, especially like a small dairy farm, there was no way you were going to be able to get picked up. So your only option then was to direct market off your farm. And that's not necessarily a great match for everybody. Some people are great farmers, but they're not good on the business side. And some of them don't want to do that. So the idea was, how can we bring back local processing? At that time, WSDA had announced they were going to do a local food infrastructure grant. And so the group came together. They formed a nonprofit in Washington State. They applied for the grant in 2022, and they got $455,000 to start a processing facility in Chewelah, Washington. So over the winter of 2022, they put a processing facility together, bought all the equipment, including a 500-gallon pasteurizer and bottling machine. And in June 2023, they opened, and we've worked with a couple different dairies. Currently, they are buying milk from 2 dairies, and we have another dairy that is coming on that actually was getting ready to go out of business because they didn't want to continue shipping to the cooperative at a larger cow level for their farm. They wanted to reduce the number of cows they had for work-life balance. And the creamery is giving them an opportunity to remain a dairy farm. And for us,
cool.
It gave us some flexibility because, if we didn't want to make, you're milking cows every day.
Yeah,
and
twice a day.
Yes, and milk can be in the bulk tank for a certain number of days, but then you have to do something with it. You either need to ship it somewhere, or you need to turn it into cheese, or you need to do something. So having the flexibility of being able to make cheese on our farm, but also be able to sell some milk to the creamery, just gave us more flexibility too. And it also made us feel good because any milk we sell, we know is going to our community. And then we're not bottling milk on our farm anymore because we just wanted to focus on cheese. And we had some customers. And so it was nice because we knew that was going to be taken care of by the creamery.
Well, it's nice for the community because they can drink and use milk products from their region instead of having to buy something at a super grocery store. I think it's pretty cool. So Emily, do you have any questions for Virginia after we talked about that cooperative?
I do. I know that the regulatory landscape of dairy can be challenging for folks looking to get into processing, and I'm curious how Columbia Community Creamery navigated that as a team.
Sure. Before we were going to go into operation, we had already worked with the local milk inspector from WSDA on the plans of the creamery. And we already knew a lot of the things that needed to happen because we had our own dairy business on our own farm. It was just more at a larger scale. So working ahead of time with WSDA, which has been fantastic. They've been very supportive of the whole project and have worked with us many times to find workarounds to different things, depending on like the space we were working in and how to make things work. And so from the regulatory side, we were very fortunate to have a really good relationship with WSDA.
Yeah, that's so important. WSDA Regional Markets is a co-lead of the Regional Food Business Center in Washington State. So to anybody listening looking to get some support navigating the regulations, Regional Markets is a non-regulatory team and can help folks navigate the regulations impacting direct to consumer sales in Washington and direct you to all the folks at WSDA who can help with that. So that's great. I'm glad that you work closely with WSDA. I am also curious, being the first nonprofit of this type in the country, and the national landscape kind of mirroring the shift that you saw in your region down to 8 dairy farms. Have you had folks across the country looking to do similar things, kind of reach out to Columbia Community Creamery for guidance on how to do something like this in their region?
Definitely. And we spoke to a group out of Maine, who were a group of organic dairy farmers, and they had funding and they were trying to figure out their business structure. And, so we talked to them about pros and cons of different things. And then we talked to some other groups out of the middle of the country, and I think down in California. And we had an article about the creamery in Hordes Dairyman. So we did have some people reach out after that. And the biggest thing is, I'm glad that you brought up the whole idea of the nonprofit, because there really is no guideline or roadmap for what we wanted to do. Because 85% of all milk in the United States is sold through cooperatives. And for the board, when they came together and were trying to figure out a business structure, their question was, if that's so great, then why do we keep losing all these farms? And so the idea was, as a nonprofit, the creamery would always have to benefit the community and have to benefit the farmers. There was never going to be like dividends or payouts to like a CEO or anything like that. And that was a huge driver for the board as they were coming together for the creamery. And not having a roadmap, one of the things that's good about that is you don't have anybody telling you that there's things that you can't do, because you figure it out and you just do it. And sometimes when you boil things down to the easiest level of, we have people who have milk and we have people who want milk. So we just have to find a way to get these people together, right? So we have to get milk from the farm to a processing plant, and from a processing plant to the community. And we just work the problem, and that's how it all came about.
That's cool. So you were chatting about some of the different types of cheese you make, and I was wondering if you've ever entered them into any of the competitions like American Cheese Society.
I have not. And on one side, I was thinking to myself, I don't make a lot of cheese. Why go out and submit them? And then if they were to do really well, and then I'd have all these people contacting me for whatever.
Wouldn't that be great?
But then I had another person who actually who has judged, like you've judged, for ACS. And she was like, you should just do it because you get back fabulous information.
Yeah, good feedback.
And so I don't know, I might.
You should do it. Try it. Just try it with one cheese and see what happens.
Are you ready to take your food packaging to the next level? Elevate your brand with epackagesupply.com. ePackage Supply offers high-quality, food-grade packaging proudly made in the USA. Plus, they're your one-stop shop for expert advice, custom labels, and printing options. Whether you're just starting out or scaling up, ePackage Supply provides flexible quantities and competitive pricing to fit your business's unique needs. Visit epackagesupply.com and use code MEANINGFUL10. That's meaningful10 for 10% off your order. Or call 866-775-4881 to chat with a food packaging expert. ePackage Supply, your partner in packaging. Visit epackagesupply.com today.
So we haven't asked you for your social media, and we haven't asked you for your website information. Could you share that with us now?
Sure. So for our farm, Clover Mountain Dairy, it is www.clovermountaindairy.com, all spelled out. And then we do have a YouTube channel which if you go to YouTube and you just type in Clover Mountain Dairy, and that we give updates on our farm, when we have new calves, when we're making cheese, building the cheese cave, all kinds of different fun things. And then for the creamery, their website is www.cccmilk.org. So it's CCC like Columbia Community Creamery, and they have a Facebook page. I think they're on Instagram too. Just
Do
under
you all
Columbia
ship?
Community
Do
Creamery.
you ship any of the products?
I have not shipped a lot of cheese, but I might this holiday season, depending on how much I have over from what I sell locally.
That's cool that you have the cave. Did you ever think about buying milk from the creamery and making larger batches of or more frequent batches of cheese, especially if you're going to fill up your cheese cave? You could do that,
I could, but for me, it is a very intimate thing that I know that
That's your milk.
Dandelion was grazing on this field,
I see.
and I
It's
took
the
that
story.
milk and I turned it into the highest quality cheese I could make on my farm from that cow. My relationship to cheese making is very much a strong kind of like classical farming thing where you have a very perishable product that you're turning into a high quality food that you can eat later. How cheese was more of a survival mechanism to make the harvest go longer. And so for me, I see it as a very, I don't know, high calling is not the right word, but just it's really important to me that I take the milk and I make it into the best cheese I can make on my farm for my house.
So let's get a little nerdy here for all those cheese people out there. What do you think is your favorite part of making cheese in the process?
I think it's just the magic that similar to like a baker who can take flour, salt, yeast, sugar, or whatever, and they can make French bread or they can make a scone or they make whatever. But like for cheese, I can take milk and just through changing like pH and temperature and maybe the culture, if I've added culture, and the size that I cut the curd and what I do with the curd afterwards, that it can become all these different types of cheeses. I just find that very magical that you can take some of the same core ingredients and you can turn it into so many different things.
That's really wonderful. So how do you innovate while keeping traditional methods alive?
How do I innovate while keeping traditional methods alive?
I guess you went to Europe to learn how to make cheese and then you brought that information back. That's pretty innovative.
I guess so. Yeah, I would have to think a little bit about that question. We definitely want to study and understand traditional cheese making, but we definitely need to do it, under the understanding of new like food safety science. Even though I'm very passionate about our milk and very passionate about the way that we produce milk and producing cheese, all of my cheese is pasteurized. It's vat pasteurized. I don't have any raw milk cheese, which some people, by the way I talk about cheese, would think that's odd. You're so passionate about it. Why would you pasteurize your milk? And for us, it's more of we just want to make sure that it's definitely 100% safe. And then from a business point of view, that pasteurizing the milk allows us to sell fresh cheeses immediately. Yeah. And so
you're making some fresh cheeses like
feta, Monterey Jack, pepper jack, cheddar curds.
Are you supplying any restaurants in your local area?
So I have had some restaurants that have bought feta and the Monterey Jack, but I don't necessarily market to them just because I don't have a lot of cheese right now. And so I'm selling a lot of it through other methods.
That's fun. So, okay, now it's storytelling time. Do you have a favorite memorable experience about your time on the dairy farm that you'd like to share with our listeners?
I guess what I would say, and there's a moral to this story. So when my husband and I first started dairy farming, we decided that we were going to leave our calves on our cow. So we were going to raise the calves with the cow. We weren't going to take them away immediately. And there was so much stuff out there that, you're going to have sick calves. The udder is going to be destroyed by the calf. It's going to be a nightmare. You're not going to get any milk. All these naysayers. And here we were, two young farmers just trying to make our way in the world. And we were just trusting our gut. And so the first cow we had calve in 2020 was Buttercup. and her calf was rainy, and because it was raining on the day it was born. And we watched that calf start nursing on its mama, and we just stood there. And my husband said, "How can that be wrong?" And I just intimately remember that story and that feeling of being like new and fresh and trying to figure out things, but, you know, having the faith to follow our gut and what we thought was right for our farm. And
So tell us
we
what
have-
happened to Rainy.
so Rainy, because he was a bull calf, became a steer.
Ah,
And then his life
oh,
plan was that he became beef. So
nice.
on our farm, we raise our calves with their mamas until about 5 or 6 months old, and then we wean them.
Nice.
So they're only get milk and, you know, forage and hay, because we don't feed any grain at all. And then we will raise, you know, if they're a steer, we will raise them for about a year and a half, and then we'll sell them for beef, or we'll sell them as a live animal to somebody else who wants to raise them. But we really believe that all the animals have an important role, because they all work together to, you know, help our land and to feed us one way or the other. And there's a strong connection between the calf and the mom, and they keep each other healthy. And so that's one of the memories that me and my husband talk about a lot. Was
That's great.
was the first day we had our first cow on our farm calf, and we were like, how can that be wrong? And
How
so
can that be wrong? So what are your hopes and goals for the future of Clover Mountain Dairy?
definitely to make more cheese. We started making cheese in 2021 while we were doing multiple other dairy products. And then as we started the creamery, we were really busy, and we made a lot of like yogurt, I think, at that time. And then for the first year of the creamery, we were selling a lot of milk to the creamery, so they would have more milk supply. So even though we have all these plans and we have a cheese cave, and we're, you know, we feel like we've been limited on the amount of cheese that we've been able to make. So now as the creamery is getting more stabilized and getting more milk supply, we'll be able to hold more milk bags for ourselves. And our goal for this next year is to, like you said, load our cheese cave, like have a lot more cheese in our cheese cave, sell more fresh cheese, and really establish ourselves as a good cheesemaker in Northeast Washington, and have a reliable amount of cheese that if somebody called us and were like, hey, we'd like to buy some of your cheese and sell it in our shop, I would be like, sure, I have that, and I could keep them supplied. Whereas right now, I don't have a lot of cheese and I keep selling out of it, which is a great thing, but it's not very reliable if it's like a shop that you want to keep. So I guess making more cheese and building up a reserve and becoming more, you know, having more reliable cells is our goal on the cheese side. And then on the farm side, we want to continue to build up the health of our soil and our cows. This year, we worked with our local conservation district, and we're putting in 800 feet of hedgerow, a mixed hedgerow. So we're excited about that project, and just continuing to enjoy farming and living the good life.
That's great. Since you brought it up, can you tell us how you balance the demands of running this great business with your personal life?
So work-life balance can be a struggle on a farm, because a lot of times things happen at the most inconvenient time, like on Christmas Eve 2020, when we were all dressed for dinner and we went out to the barn to check on the cows, and one of our calves had an ear button that got caught somewhere and she ripped it out. So there we were, standing in really nice clothes and barn boots, like doctoring her ear, and like dinner was completely cold by the time we got back into the house. But that's how it goes. So I think the thing that we love about that, though, is that we, you know, every day is different, and to have work-life balance, you also have to make sure that you're not getting out over your skis. So for us, that means not growing beyond what we feel comfortable at, and making sure that we do take time for ourselves, and we do schedule things, even if they're simple things like, you know, driving up to Canada to go to Tim Hortons for no reason at all, but just to go to Tim Hortons one morning.
Nice.
And, you know, or scheduling going down and seeing a Broadway show in Spokane, you know, just little things that it's not like huge trips. It's just little things. Yeah. And normally every night before we turn off the TV, we go on YouTube, and we watch funny videos because laughing is such a good stress release, and it just kind of like clears things out of your system for the day. And so we do that.
Nice. Emily, do you have some last questions for Virginia before we close out the show?
Yeah, I have a closing question. When I was looking at the Columbia Community Creamery website, something that stood out to me, or a quote that stuck with me, is that dairy farming is a long-term partnership between the farmer and the cow. And through your stories today, I've heard how much you embody that at Clover Mountain Dairy. And I'd love to hear if there are any other ways that that lens and that perspective of dairy farming shows up in the day-to-day, either at Clover Mountain Dairy or at Columbia Community Creamery.
So definitely, you know, just like a lot of animals, the cows all have their own personality. They have their own moo. And so we, you know, they're almost like they are co-workers. They are co-workers. And, you know, when we're milking them, they have a certain order they want to come in. And it's just very interesting. So seeing them as individuals, I think, is like a way that is like this long-term partnership. And on smaller farms, you will have cows that are older, you know, who have been multiple lactations. You know, there's cows that are teenagers, whereas in modern conventional dairy, confinement dairy operations, you will have a lot younger cows. So when we say it's like this lifetime partnership, it's this idea of, you know, these are our coworkers. We're working hard together to produce really high quality milk, because dairy cows, if they're super stressed or they're not doing well, then they don't, you know, make great milk. And not all milk is created equal. And so working, you know, with the cows and having this partnership, it really does produce, you know, super high quality milk with like higher butter fat, higher solids non-fat, higher protein, and it just tastes better. So I think that's one way, is just knowing them and seeing them as individuals, seeing as a partnership. And then especially at the creamery, the milk that is in that bottle, it's not homogenized. So you see a cream line, and right now I think the butter fat is at about 6%. Whoa. Whereas standardized whole milk in the grocery store is 3.25%. So it's pretty rich. So I think that's how you can see that on the creamery level, is the quality of the milk.
Well, thank you to Emily, our co-host from Washington State, and thank you, Virginia, for highlighting your journey and the essence of Clover Mountain Dairy. And we'd like to thank our listeners to the Meaningful Marketplace podcast. But before we go, I want to just let you know that if you would go to Apple Podcasts or iTunes and leave us a 5-star review for our Meaningful Marketplace podcast, that would be great. We also have an option for you to call in and leave us a question that we'll play live. The phone number for that is 503-395-8858. And we could not do this without our fantastic team at the Joy of Creation production house. So thank you to Kayleen, our production coordinator, and Haley, our audio engineer. Until next week, we thank you all for joining us. Bye for now.